In all programming languages these days, there are tools that will actually help us to debug our code when it's a bit more complex for just a trace or a quick scan of the syntax to work. I'm going to show you a debugger in JavaScript just to show you the kind of things you'd expect from a debugger in any language. JavaScript, of course, is a language that lives in a web browser, and that's really where our debugger needs to live too. And what I'm going to use is probably the most well-known debugger for JavaScript, which is something called Firebug. This is a free extension for the Firefox web browser. So it adds extra functionality into the web browser. And after it's been installed, you can turn it on for any page or any website that you're looking at. So I'm looking at my page here. I'm going to go up to my Tools menu and turn Firebug on. Just open it up. It opens up in the lower part of the screen, although you can choose to open it in a separate window. You can adjust this and have more or less of your regular page if you want to. This is fine for me. Now, Firebug is a general-purpose web development tool. It's not just a JavaScript debugger, but that's the part that I'm most interested in. So it has several different tabs I can get to. The only two I'm interested in here are the console, which is right now disabled. So I'm going to enable it, and it tells me to reload it, and enabling the JavaScript debugger, I'm going to reload, there we go. And also the script section, which I'm also going to click the button to enable. Now, as soon as I do that, what it's doing is showing me the actual script that this page is linking to. I've added a few more lines there, but we'll go through that in a moment. Just for our purposes, this font is a little small, so I'm going to change some of the settings of Firebug and just zoom into that a bit more. So I can change the text size of what I'm looking at. And this should make it a bit easier to read. Now you might think, okay, big deal, we can actually look at the code, but so what? I can already look at the code. Yes, but here's the thing. It's meant to diagnose problems. So if we've got the same problem that we had before, which is when I click the headline, it's not doing what I thought it should be doing, which is changing it, I can use the Firebug extension to help me find out why. And the classic example here is I can set a breakpoint. So if I think that here I should be calling first function, I can set a breakpoint, which will say stop whenever you get to this line. What I do is click on the gray bar to the left of it. Well, then what? Well, it doesn't look very impressive, but what happens, of course, is this should only be hit when I click up here. So I'm going to click. And as soon as I do, the breakpoint is hit in our code. And it says, okay, I've paused execution. Usually, what JavaScript would try and do is run through this code as quickly as possible to call first function and move into the code that's inside that function. But we said no, break, pause before it. So we get this little arrow that's pointing and saying, okay, we're paused right before this line of code should be executed. Well, what is this line of code? Well, it's a call to something called first function, which is defined up at the top of our code here. First function is over there. Could be in a completely separate file. Now back down here, what I'm going to do is say, okay, let's start going through line by line. That's the power of a debugger, stepping through our code as it's actually running, not just looking at it on paper. So up here, what we have is when we're in this break mode, we've got the ability to rerun code, to just hit continue and just continue on to the next breakpoint. And we've got a variety of step into, step over, and step out, which allows us to go into functions or jump out of functions. The one you typically use most of the time is this one called step into. I'm going to click that button, and what it's going to do is execute this line of code, which should move us into the function called first function. So I click it once, jump. We jump into the first line of the function. Notice that we don't jump to line 2, where the actual function name is, because that's not really a statement. It doesn't do anything. We're jumping into the first bit of code, the first part of the function that actually does anything, which is going to create a variable called a and set it equal to 5. But we are paused before this line is executed, so right now I can actually move over a, and it's going to do this little tooltip that says, does a have a value? Well, it says right now it's undefined. And in fact, over here on the right-hand side, we have what's called the watch panel, which says, yes, as far as I know, there should be 3 variables in this function, a, b, and c, and they're all undefined. None of them have values. So I go back up to my play controls, and I'm going to say step into, which just goes forward. A is now equal to 5. We're waiting to create B. I step over. B is now equal to 10. I can see those values either in the watch panel over here or by mousing over them. Now we're at line 5, which is going to be a call to second function. So what should happen is, if I click step into, we'll jump onto line 9, which is the first line of second function. And indeed, that's where we are. Create another variable, set it, make a call to third function. We jump to line 14, then to line 15. Now notice that we go from line 15 to line 17. When we have a blank line, there is no meaning there. We don't execute a blank line of code. It's insignificant white space. That's why it's also grayed out in the bar here, because it would make no sense to try and set a breakpoint there. Now, one of the issues sometimes with stepping into your code and going through it line by line is sometimes it can be kind of tedious. We've got a while loop here that's going to go around 100 times. Well, it might be a little annoying if all I had to do was just keep clicking and clicking and clicking and clicking and clicking and clicking. I can actually see my counter, I equal to 16, total is 1600. I've still got 84 clicks to go, so I really don't want to do that. So I'll go ahead and I'll create another breakpoint here, outside of the loop, before we're calling fourth function. And instead of saying step into, I'm just going to hit continue. What happens is it zooms around the loop. I can actually go over here to the watch panel and see that it did go around 100 times, and total ended up getting set to 10,000. And then here's our call to fourth function, of which we do have a slight problem. So I try and execute that. It's not going to work. And in fact, over here in the console, we've got these problems here. Fourth function is not defined. So what JavaScript did is it said, I don't know what to do, so I'm jumping back to where third function was called. And now if I click step into, we're actually going to go back all the way up from second function to first function, and then jump back to where it was called. And if I click step into one more time, what happens is we shift out of break mode because our event handler finished running. We're now back to the normal view. No JavaScript is running now. Now, of course, the debugger can get a little deeper than this, but if you think of these being the core pieces, allowing you to see your code as it's executing, being able to see the values of the variables as your code is running, being able to set breakpoints, to jump into functions, to jump out of functions. That's the power of a debugger. One of the great things it allows you to do is just follow your code. Does it actually work the way you expect it to? These are the core pieces of a debugger, and you'll find them in every language. Most of the time they're built into applications like integrated development environments, things like Xcode or Eclipse or Visual Studio. But whatever language you use, you'll find debuggers can be a tremendous help in clearing up problems with your code.